They said she went mad 3 years ago. They were wrong. Behind the locked door of Thornwood Manor's East Wing, Alara Vance wasn't insane. She was a prisoner. Starved, erased, buried alive in her own home while her stepmother carved up her inheritance like a feast. But madness and clarity can look identical through iron bars. And tonight, when a war-scarred duke glimpsed a pale face in a window that should have been empty, everything began to unravel. This is the story of how a ghost became a weapon. Stay until the end, like this video. Comment your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you what really happened. The manor smelled like old money and newer lies. Rowan Blackmore noticed it the moment he stepped through the entrance hall. Too much perfume in the air, too many fresh flowers for a house this cold. His boots echoed on marble that had been polished to a mirror shine, and somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked like a heartbeat that didn't quite match the rhythm of the place. He didn't want to be here. He'd come to Thornwood Manor because his mother had insisted, because refusing Lady Catherine Vance's dinner invitation would have been a social disaster, and because, after 3 years of battlefield mud and cannon smoke, he was apparently expected to play the civilized gentleman again. The role didn't fit anymore. Your Grace. Lady Catherine descended the staircase like she owned gravity itself. Mid-40s, beautiful in that preserved way that money could buy, wearing black silk that whispered wealth with every movement. How wonderful of you to accept my invitation. Rowan bowed, shallow, proper. Lady Catherine. You must be exhausted from your journey. Come. Dinner is nearly ready, and I've invited several neighbors who are simply dying to hear about your heroics in the Crimea. He wanted to tell her there was nothing heroic about watching men drown in their own blood, but he smiled instead. You're too kind. She led him through corridors lined with portraits, generations of Vances staring down with expressions ranging from stern to constipated. He recognized none of them. The family wasn't old aristocracy, not really. Richard Vance had been a merchant who'd bought his way into the gentry, married up, built this monstrosity of a house, and promptly died of apoplexy before he could enjoy it. That had been 6 years ago. Since then, Lady Catherine had ruled Thornwood like a queen without a kingdom. I hope you don't mind, she said, guiding him into a drawing room. But dinner will be slightly delayed. My cook is temperamental, and I refuse to serve anything less than perfection. Of course. Please make yourself comfortable. I'll have tea sent in. She vanished in a rustle of silk, leaving him alone with uncomfortable furniture and a view of the gardens. Rowan walked to the window. Outside, the ground sprawled in manicured perfection, hedges trimmed into geometric submission, flower beds arranged like military formations, gravel paths that curved with mathematical precision. Everything controlled, everything in its place. He hated it immediately. Give him a muddy trench over this any day. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust, and for a moment he let himself drift, back to the peninsula, back to the weight of command, back to decisions that had cost lives and saved others, and sometimes he still couldn't tell which was which. That's when he saw her. A face, pale, pressed against a window in the east wing. Rowan went still. The window was on the 3rd floor, partially obscured by ivy, and the face was there for only a heartbeat. White skin, dark eyes, a hand pressed against glass. And then it was gone. But he'd seen it. Someone was up there. He turned away from the window, processing. The east wing had looked abandoned from the outside. Shutters closed, no lights. The kind of wing that wealthy families closed off to save on heating and servants. But someone had been in that window. A servant, probably. Or a guest. Or... The door opened. A maid entered with a tea tray, set it down with practiced efficiency, and curtsied her way back out. Rowan didn't touch the tea. He was still thinking about that face. Dinner was a parade of mediocrity dressed up as sophistication. 6 courses, 12 guests, endless conversation about things that didn't matter. The weather, the season, who was courting whom, speculation about the new railway expansion, complaints about servant quality, gossip wrapped in politeness and served with wine. Rowan played his part, answered questions about the war with carefully sanitized stories, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, complimented the hostess. But his mind kept drifting to that window. Your Grace. He blinked. Lady Catherine was looking at him with concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Forgive me," he said smoothly. "I'm afraid the journey has caught up with me." "Of course, you must be exhausted." She gestured to a servant. "More wine for His Grace." The conversation moved on. Someone was talking about hunting season. Someone else about the scandal in London involving a banker's wife and a French pianist. Rowan let it wash over him like rain. Across the table, a young woman caught his attention, not because she was speaking, but because she wasn't. Early 20s, blonde, pretty in a nervous sort of way. She'd barely touched her food, and every time Lady Catherine spoke, she flinched, just slightly, just enough to notice if you were looking. "And this is my stepdaughter, Lyra," Lady Catherine said, following his gaze. "She's been such a help since my poor dear husband passed." "Haven't you, darling?" Lyra's smile was fragile as wet paper. "Yes, stepmother." "She's terribly shy, I'm afraid. Not like her sister." Lady Catherine cut herself off. The table went quiet. It was the kind of silence that appears when someone mentions a dead relative at a wedding. Awkward. Heavy. Wrong. "Her sister?" Rowan asked, because the soldier in him recognized a weak point when he saw one. Lady Catherine's smile didn't waver. "My late husband's eldest daughter. Poor girl, she had difficulties. Mental difficulties." "I see. It was very tragic. She had to be sent away for treatment 3 years ago." "We don't speak of it, for Lyra's sake, you understand. The scandal was quite enough without constant reminders." Rowan watched Lyra's knuckles go white around her fork. "Of course," he said. The conversation moved on. Someone started talking about horses, but Rowan was thinking about an empty east wing and a face in a window and a stepmother who smiled too much when she talked about tragedy. He requested a tour of the gardens after dinner. Lady Catherine demurred. It was getting dark, the paths weren't lit properly. Perhaps tomorrow morning would be better. But he insisted with the kind of polite stubbornness that war heroes could get away with, and eventually she relented. "I'll have a servant accompany you," she said. "That won't be necessary. I'm quite capable of walking alone." "But, Your Grace, I insist. I've spent 3 years surrounded by men. I'd appreciate the solitude." She couldn't argue with that without seeming rude, so she let him go. Rowan stepped out into the cool evening air and immediately stopped pretending to be interested in gardens. He circled the manor. The east wing was darker than the rest of the house. Shutters closed, no lamplight bleeding through curtains, walls covered in climbing ivy that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. Above him, 3 stories of abandoned architecture loomed against the darkening sky. He counted windows until he found the right one. 3rd floor, corner room, still dark. Rowan stared at it for a long moment, weighing options. Then he did something monumentally stupid. He started climbing. The ivy was old and thick, the stone underneath offering plenty of handholds. It wasn't elegant, he nearly slipped twice, and his dress coat was going to be ruined, but eventually he hauled himself up to the 3rd floor window ledge and peered inside. Dark. Empty. Nothing but movement. Someone was in there. Rowan's eyes adjusted slowly. The room was barely furnished, a narrow bed, a small table, a chair, no decorations, no carpet. The kind of room you'd give a servant if you didn't like that servant very much. And huddled in the corner, staring at him with eyes that reflected what little moonlight made it through the dirty glass, was a woman. Young, rail-thin, dressed in something that might have been white once but had faded to gray. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at him like he was a hallucination she'd decided not to trust. Rowan tried the window, locked. He tapped the glass gently. The woman flinched but didn't run. He tapped again, then mouthed slowly, "Can you hear me?" She nodded. Once. Sharp. "Are you hurt?" She hesitated, then nodded again. "Are you Alara Vance?" The change in her expression was immediate. Shock, then something that might have been hope, if hope hadn't been beaten out of her by 3 years of whatever the hell this was. She nodded a 3rd time. Rowan's jaw tightened. "I'm gonna help you," he mouthed. "I promise." She laughed. He could see it even if he couldn't hear it, her shoulders shaking, her head tilting back, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who stopped believing in promises a long time ago. Then she stood, walked to the window, and pressed her palm against the glass. Rowan pressed his against the other side. They stayed like that for a heartbeat. Two people separated by glass and iron and lies. Then voices drifted up from below and Rowan had to move. He climbed down faster than he'd climbed up, dropped the last 8 feet, landed hard enough to jar his teeth, and walked back around to the main entrance like nothing had happened. His coat was filthy, his hands were scraped, and he had just found a woman who was supposed to have been sent away 3 years ago, locked in a room in her own house. He left Thornwood Manor the next morning with polite thanks and lies about urgent business in London. Lady Catherine saw him off personally, all smiles and grace, and invited him to return whenever he wished. Rowan smiled back and promised nothing. The moment his carriage was out of sight of the house, he pulled out a notebook and started writing. Everything he'd seen, everything he'd heard. The locked room, the woman, Lyra's fear, Lady Catherine's too smooth explanations. None of it made sense yet, but it would. Rowan Blackmore had spent 3 years as a military strategist, reading battlefields and enemy movements, finding patterns in chaos. This was just another kind of war, and he was very, very good at war. Inside Thornwood Manor, in a locked room in the East Wing, Alara Vance sat on her bed and tried to decide if last night had been real. A man, at her window, promising help. Probably a dream. Probably her mind finally cracking under the weight of 3 years in this room, 3 years of starvation rations and silence and the slow, methodical erasure of her existence. But his hand had felt warm through the glass, and his eyes had been steady. And for the first time in 3 years, someone had seen her. Not the ghost her stepmother wanted her to be. Not the mad girl from the stories. Her. Alara stood and walked to the small mirror above her wash basin, the only mirror Catherine had allowed her to keep, probably because it was too small to break into useful shards. She looked like a corpse. Hair that used to be chestnut, now lank and dull. Skin that used to be sun-touched, now pale as parchment. Eyes that used to be bright, now sunken and ringed with shadows. She'd lost weight until her dress hung on her like a shroud. But she was still here. Still thinking, still planning, still waiting for the moment when Catherine made a mistake. And maybe last night had been that mistake. A duke had seen her, a war hero, someone with power and connections and resources, someone who could make noise that Catherine couldn't silence. Alara allowed herself a smile. It felt strange on her face. 3 floors below, Lyra Vance sat in her room and tried not to cry. She'd heard the servants whispering this morning. The Duke had left early, claimed urgent business, probably wouldn't return. Her stepmother had been in a foul mood ever since, snapping at maids and criticizing everything. Which meant something had happened. Lyra didn't know what. Didn't know if it involved Alara. Didn't know if she dared hope. But she'd seen the way the Duke looked at the East Wing during dinner, like a soldier analyzing terrain. And she'd seen the way Catherine's smile had sharpened when she noticed. Lyra stood and walked to her writing desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began composing a letter she probably wouldn't send. Dear Your Grace, if you're reading this, it means I found the courage to trust you. She stopped, crossed it out, started again. Dear Your Grace, my sister is not mad, simpler, truer. She never was. My stepmother has kept her locked in the East Wing for 3 years. I have tried to help her, but I am watched constantly, and I am terrified of what will happen if Catherine discovers I know the truth. If there is any mercy in this world, please believe me. Please help her. I cannot do this alone anymore. Lyra signed it, folded it, sealed it with wax, and hid it in her jewelry box. She didn't know how to get it to the Duke, but she would find a way. She had to. 2 weeks passed. For Alara, they were the same as the weeks before. Measured in meals that barely kept her alive, in hours of silence broken only by the sound of her own breathing, in the slow march of sunlight across the floor that marked the passage of time. But something had changed. She could feel it. The servants who brought her food were nervous. Catherine's visits had become more frequent, more probing, asking questions about Alara's health, her state of mind, whether she'd been seeing things that weren't there. Alara played her part, confused, fragile, broken. It wasn't hard, but inside she was counting days. For Rowan, the 2 weeks were a blur of investigation. He started in London, digging through records at Somerset House. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates, Richard Vance had died 6 years ago, leaving his estate to his wife with the provision that it would pass to his daughters upon Catherine's death or remarriage. Simple enough. Except Richard's first wife, Ilara and Lyra's mother, had died when the girls were young, and Richard had remarried Catherine 5 years before his own death. The timeline was convenient. Rowan pulled more records. Catherine's background, her first marriage to a minor gentleman who'd died young and left her nothing. Her second marriage to Richard Vance, who died conveniently before he could change his will. Too convenient. He moved to medical records next, found the doctor who had signed Ilara's commitment papers 3 years ago. A Dr. Whitmore, who had a practice in London and a reputation for flexibility. Rowan paid him a visit. The doctor's office was in a respectable part of town, which was the first warning sign. The second was the way Whitmore's expression went carefully blank when Rowan mentioned Ilara Vance. "I'm afraid I can't discuss my patients, Your Grace." "She's not in an asylum," Rowan said flatly. "I checked. Every private facility in England. None of them have record of an Ilara Vance." Whitmore's smile was oil on water. Perhaps she was admitted under a different name, for privacy. Or perhaps she was never admitted at all. Silence. Rowan leaned forward. "I'm going to ask you one question, and I suggest you answer honestly. Did you ever actually examine Ilara Vance?" The doctor's face went gray. I was paid to sign papers. Lady Catherine assured me the girl was violent, a danger to herself and others, that the family wanted to avoid scandal. You signed commitment papers without examining the patient. It's not uncommon, Your Grace. Families often prefer, get out." "What?" Rowan stood. "Get out of London. Retire. Disappear. Because if I ever see your name on another medical document, I will make sure every physician in England knows exactly how you conduct your practice." Whitmore fled. Rowan sat back down and added another note to his growing file. The plan came together slowly. Evidence first. Witnesses second. Legal authority third. He couldn't just storm Thornwood Manor and drag Ilara out. Catherine would claim he was kidnapping a madwoman. And without proof, society would side with the grieving stepmother over the war hero with no connection to the family. So he built his case methodically. Servants who'd been dismissed from Thornwood over the past 3 years. A former cook who remembered Ilara as perfectly sane. A gardener who'd been fired after asking too many questions about the locked East Wing. Each one added another piece. But the key was Lyra. The letter arrived via a young maid who'd been dismissed a month ago and who Rowan had tracked down through sheer persistence. The girl had been terrified, certain she'd be punished for helping, but she'd carried Lyra's letter in her pocket for weeks, waiting for someone to trust. Rowan read it 3 times. Then he started planning an extraction. Inside Thornwood Manor, Catherine was planning too. She'd seen the way the Duke looked at the East Wing. She'd noticed his early departure. She'd heard whispers that he'd been asking questions in London, which meant time was running out. 3 years. 3 long years of keeping Ilara hidden, of slowly starving her into genuine madness, of waiting for the girl to either die quietly or break completely. But Ilara had proven stubborn, so Catherine changed tactics. "Prepare the carriage," she told her butler. "We're moving my stepdaughter to a private facility. Tonight." The butler hesitated. "Tonight, my lady? Is there a problem?" "No, my lady, but the staff will talk. Let them. By morning she'll be gone and there will be nothing anyone can do about it." Catherine smiled. Everything was under control. Lyra found out by accident. She'd been walking past her stepmother's study when she heard voices, Catherine and the butler, discussing arrangements, talking about a facility in Scotland, mentioning Ilara's name. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. Tonight. They were moving her tonight. Lyra didn't think, didn't plan, just ran. Up the stairs, through corridors, to the door she wasn't supposed to know existed, the servants' entrance to the East Wing, locked but pickable if you had a hairpin and enough desperation. She got the door open on the 3rd try. The hallway beyond was dark and dusty, and for a moment she almost turned back. Then she thought of Ilara, alone up there, waiting for help that had never come. Lyra started climbing. The door to Ilara's room was locked too, but this one had a key hidden above the frame. She'd seen a servant use it once, years ago, before Catherine had forbidden anyone to visit. Lyra grabbed it with shaking hands and opened the door. Inside, her sister sat on the bed like a ghost. "Lyra?" The voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper. "We have to go," Lyra said. "Right now. They're moving you tonight, some facility in Scotland. We have to... I can't walk that far." It was said so matter-of-factly that Lyra almost missed it. "What?" Alara stood slowly, and Lyra saw it. The way she swayed, the way her legs trembled, the way 3 years of near starvation had hollowed her out until standing was an act of will. "I can barely make it to the door," Alara said. "If we run, I'll collapse before we reach the gardens." "Then I'll carry you." "You can't." "I'll find a way." "Alara, please, we can't just wait for them to—" The sound of footsteps in the hallway cut her off. Both sisters froze. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A key turned in the lock. Catherine stepped inside. She looked at Lyra, looked at Alara, looked at the open door. Then she smiled. "Well," she said softly, "isn't this convenient?" What happened next happened fast. Catherine grabbed Lyra's arm, hard enough to bruise, and dragged her toward the door. Lyra fought, scratched, screamed. It didn't matter. Catherine was stronger, fueled by rage, and 3 years of carefully maintained control finally snapping, and she hauled Lyra into the hallway and slammed the door shut, locked it. "You stupid, stupid girl," Catherine hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Let me go. You're going to your room. You're going to pack a bag, and tomorrow morning you're going to visit your aunt in Cornwall for an extended stay." "No!" "Yes, and if you ever speak of this again, if you ever mention your sister's name, I will make sure you join her. Do you understand me?" Lyra went still. Catherine's eyes were cold as winter. "Do you understand?" "Yes," Lyra whispered. "Good." Catherine released her and straightened her dress, composure sliding back into place like armor. "Now go to your room and stay there. I'll deal with your sister." Lyra ran, not to her room, down the stairs, through the servant corridors, out the back door, into the night. She didn't have a plan, didn't have money or supplies or any idea where she was going, but she ran anyway, toward the village, toward help, toward anyone who might listen. Behind her, Thornwood Manor loomed like a monument to lies. And inside, in a locked room in the East Wing, Alara Vance sat on her bed and waited for the end. Lyra made it 3 miles before her legs gave out. She collapsed on the side of the road, gasping, her slippers torn to shreds and her feet bleeding. The village lights were still distant pinpricks in the darkness, and behind her, somewhere in that black expanse, Thornwood Manor sat like a sleeping monster. She'd failed, run away like a coward while Alara was still locked in that room, still waiting, still... Hoofbeats. Lyra scrambled backward into the brush, heart hammering. If Catherine had sent men after her, if they dragged her back to the manor, but the rider who came around the bend wasn't one of Catherine's men. It was the Duke. Rowan Blackmore pulled his horse to a stop, dismounted in one smooth motion, and stood there staring at her like she'd materialized out of his worst nightmare. "Miss Vance?" Lyra tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. "Your Grace, my sister, they're moving her tonight, and I tried to help, but Catherine caught me and I ran and I don't know what to do." She was babbling, couldn't stop. The words poured out in a breathless rush while Rowan knelt beside her and checked her for injuries with the detached efficiency of someone who'd done battlefield triage. "You're bleeding," he said. "My sister is dying." That stopped him. His eyes met hers, and whatever he saw there made him nod once, sharp. "Tell me everything, quickly." So she did. The locked room, the years of imprisonment, Catherine's plan to move Alara tonight, the way her sister could barely stand, let alone run. Rowan listened without interrupting, his expression getting harder with every sentence. When she finished, he stood and pulled her to her feet. "Can you ride?" Yes, I think so." "Good, because we're going back." Lyra's stomach dropped. "Back? But Catherine will... I don't care what Catherine will do." He lifted her onto the horse like she weighed nothing. "I have 3 men waiting at the village inn, a magistrate who owes me a favor, and enough evidence to bury your stepmother 6 feet under, but I need your sister alive to testify." He swung up behind her and kicked the horse into a gallop. They rode toward Thornwood Manor like cavalry charging into battle. Inside her locked room, Alara heard the carriage arrive, footsteps in the hallway. Catherine's voice, cold and clipped, giving orders. The sound of the key turning in the lock. The door opened. 2 men entered first, heavy-set, rough-looking, the kind you hired when you needed something done quietly and didn't care about the methods. Behind them, Catherine stood in the doorway like a queen surveying a conquered territory. "Get her in the carriage," she said. "Be careful with the laudanum. I want her sedated, not dead. Yet." One of the men grabbed Alara's arm. She didn't resist. Couldn't, really. 3 years of starvation had made resistance a joke. But she looked at Catherine with eyes that were perfectly clear and perfectly cold. "You won't get away with this," Alara said. Her voice was rusty, but steady. Catherine smiled. "I already have, darling. For 3 years I've gotten away with it. Tonight is just housekeeping." "Lyra knows." "Lyra is a child who will say whatever I tell her to say, and even if she doesn't—" Catherine shrugged. Who would believe her? The devoted stepmother or the hysterical girl defending her mad sister? The man holding Alara's arm pulled out a small vial. Laudanum, enough to knock her unconscious for the journey. Alara's mind raced. If they drugged her now, it was over. They'd take her to some remote facility in Scotland, keep her sedated and compliant, and in 6 months, no one would even remember she'd existed. She had one chance. "Wait," she said. Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Second thoughts about defiance?" "No. Second thoughts about going quietly." Alara turned to the man holding the vial. "She's going to kill you, you know. Once you've delivered me, can't have witnesses." The man's grip tightened. "Shut up. She killed her first husband, probably her second too. My father was healthy as a horse until she decided his will was satisfactory." Alara's voice gained strength. "You think she'll let 2 hired thugs live after committing kidnapping and false imprisonment?" I said shut up, but doubt had crept into his expression. Catherine stepped forward. "Don't listen to her. She's mad, remember? Delusional." "Am I?" Alara looked at the second man. "How much is she paying you? 50 pounds? 100? That's how much your life is worth to her. Just enough to get you to do the job. Not enough to matter when you disappear." "Give her the laudanum," Catherine snapped. "Now." The first man uncorked the vial. And that's when the sound of horses echoed through the grounds. Multiple horses. Coming fast. Catherine's face went white. "What?" The front door crashed open downstairs. Voices. Shouting. Heavy footsteps on marble. The 2 hired men exchanged glances, and Alara saw it, the moment they decided their pay wasn't worth whatever was coming up those stairs. They dropped her and ran. Catherine lunged after them. "Get back here. I'm paying you to—" "Keep the money," one of them shouted over his shoulder. "We're done." They vanished down the servants' stairs. Catherine stood frozen in the doorway, her careful composure cracking like ice over deep water. Downstairs, a man's voice rang out with military authority. "Lady Catherine Vance, by order of the magistrate, you are to present yourself immediately." "Rowan." Catherine's eyes met Alara's. For one long moment they stared at each other, stepmother and stepdaughter, captor and prisoner, the woman who'd tried to erase someone's existence and the woman who'd refused to disappear. Then Catherine turned and ran, not toward the voices, away from them, down the hallway, toward the back stairs, toward whatever escape route she'd planned for emergencies exactly like this. Alara tried to stand, her legs buckled. 3 years of malnutrition and muscle atrophy meant running was impossible, standing was difficult, and even crawling required more strength than she currently possessed. But she had to try. She made it to the doorway before her vision started graying out. That's where Lyra found her. Her sister came running up the stairs with Rowan right behind her, and the expression on Lyra's face, relief and horror and guilt, all tangled together. Would have been funny if Alara had any energy left for laughing. "Oh no," Lyra whispered. "Alara, I'm so sorry. I should have—" "Stop apologizing and help me up." Rowan reached them first. He took one look at Alara's condition and his jaw went tight. "Can you walk?" Define walk. Can you make it down the stairs without collapsing? Probably not. He didn't ask permission, just scooped her up like she weighed nothing, which, considering her current state, she practically didn't. Alara wanted to protest, wanted to say she could manage, that she didn't need carrying, that she'd been managing alone for 3 years and didn't need rescuing now. But her body betrayed her. The moment she stopped holding herself upright through sheer willpower, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Catherine ran, she mumbled against Rowan's shoulder. Backstairs. She'll have an escape planned. I know. I have men covering every exit. His voice was steady, calm, the voice of someone who'd commanded troops under fire and wasn't about to panic now. You're safe, Alara laughed. Couldn't help it. Safe? That's a word I haven't heard in a while. Get used to it. He carried her down the stairs while Lyra hovered anxiously behind them, and Alara let herself drift, not unconscious, just disconnected, watching the scene unfold from somewhere outside her own body. The entry hall was full of people, men in official-looking coats, a magistrate she didn't recognize, servants clustered in corners, whispering, the butler looking like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Everyone stopped and stared when Rowan appeared with her in his arms. Alara must have looked like a ghost, probably smelled like one too, considering she hadn't had a proper bath in 3 years. The magistrate stepped forward. Miss Alara Vance? That's me. Her voice came out hoarse. Or what's left of me? I'm Magistrate Pemberton. His Grace has made some very serious allegations regarding your treatment in this household. I need to ask you some questions. Can they wait until she's seen a doctor? Rowan's tone suggested the answer better be yes. Pemberton glanced at Alara's skeletal frame and nodded quickly. Of course, but Lady Catherine is running, Alara said. Check the stables. She'll try for a horse. One of the men took off at a sprint. Rowan carried Alara into the drawing room and set her down carefully on a sofa that felt obscenely soft after 3 years of a thin mattress. Lyra immediately draped a blanket over her and started fussing with pillows. I'm fine, Alara said. You're not fine. You look like you're about to fall apart. I've been about to fall apart for 3 years. I'm very good at it. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. This is my fault. I should have done something sooner. I should have... Stop. Alara grabbed her sister's hand. It took effort. You did everything you could, more than anyone else did. I was scared. Of course you were. She's terrifying. Alara managed a weak smile. But you're here now. That's what matters. Rowan was talking to the magistrate in low tones near the doorway. Alara caught fragments, evidence, witnesses, medical examination, formal charges, and felt something in her chest unknot slightly. This was real. This was actually happening. She wasn't just dreaming escape anymore. She was living it. A doctor arrived 20 minutes later, summoned from the village, looking flustered and concerned. He took one look at Alara and his expression went grim. Miss Vance, I need to examine you. Is that acceptable? Do I have a choice? Of course, but I strongly recommend... Fine. Examine away. Just... Can my sister stay? Lyra squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. The examination was humiliating and thorough. The doctor asked questions Alara answered mechanically. When did you last eat a full meal? Have you experienced any fainting spells? Any unusual pain? Any difficulty breathing? While his hands checked her pulse, listened to her heartbeat, prodded her ribs. Severe malnutrition, he said finally. Muscle atrophy, signs of extended confinement and neglect. He looked at the magistrate. This woman has been systematically starved. Can you document that? I can and will. The doctor's voice was ice. This is beyond medical neglect. This is torture. Alara laughed. It came out bitter. Took you 3 years to notice. I beg your pardon? Not you specifically. Everyone. The whole damn county. I've been locked in a room for 3 years and no one questioned it. Silence fell over the room. The doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably. I will prepare a full medical report for the court. Thank you. He left and Alara sagged against the pillows. Every muscle ached. Every bone felt like glass. But underneath the exhaustion was something new. Anger. Clean, sharp, burning anger at every person who'd looked the other way. At Catherine for obvious reasons. At her father for marrying that woman in the first place. At society for accepting the convenient lie of madness rather than asking uncomfortable questions. At herself for not fighting harder. They caught her. Rowan's voice pulled her back. He stood in the doorway, face unreadable. Catherine? Alara asked. Trying to leave through the north gate. My men stopped her. He paused. She's in the custody of the magistrate now. You won't see her again tonight. Good. There's more. Rowan moved into the room, and for the first time since she'd met him, through a window, in darkness, when she'd been too broken to believe in rescue, Alara saw uncertainty in his expression. The magistrate wants to remove you from this house, temporarily, until the trial. Remove me where? My estate. It's 30 miles from here, well-staffed, and you'd have round-the-clock care. Lyra, too, if she wishes. Alara looked at her sister. Do you wish? Lyra nodded so hard she nearly gave herself whiplash. Yes, please, I can't stay here another night. Then I suppose we're accepting your hospitality, Your Grace. Alara met Rowan's eyes. Though I should warn you, I'm terrible company. 3 years of solitary confinement haven't done wonders for my social skills. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. I spent 3 years in a war zone. I think we'll manage. They left Thornwood Manor just before dawn. Alara had to be carried to the carriage. Her legs simply wouldn't support her for the distance. But she stayed conscious this time, watching the manor recede through the window. It looked smaller in daylight, less like the prison that had consumed 3 years of her life, and more like just a house. Stone and mortar and glass. Nothing supernatural, nothing unconquerable, just a place where bad things had happened. You all right? Lyra asked quietly. Alara realized she was crying. She wiped her face roughly. I don't know. Ask me in a week. The journey to Rowan's estate took 3 hours with frequent stops to let Alara rest. Every jostle of the carriage sent pain shooting through her abused muscles, and twice she had to ask them to stop so she could be sick. Humiliating. But Rowan and Lyra treated it like it was perfectly normal, and eventually Alara stopped apologizing. Blackmore House appeared through morning mist like something from a painting. Gray stone, ivy-covered walls, windows that actually had curtains. Smaller than Thornwood Manor, but somehow more solid. More real. The staff was waiting. A housekeeper named Mrs. Davies who took one look at Alara and immediately started issuing orders about hot baths and meals and fresh linens. A cook who promised soup within the hour. A maid who volunteered to help with bathing and dressing. Alara let them fuss. She was too tired to fight it, and honestly, the thought of a hot bath sounded like paradise. They installed her in a room on the second floor, large, airy, with windows that actually opened and doors that didn't lock from the outside. The bed was enormous. The floor had carpet. There were books on shelves and flowers and vases, and everything was clean. Alara stood in the middle of it and felt panic rising. Too much space, too much light, too much everything after years of nothing. Easy, Rowan said from the doorway. Breathe. I can't. This is overwhelming. I know. When I came back from the war, normal rooms felt wrong too. Too quiet. Too safe. He stepped inside but kept his distance. It gets easier. When? Eventually. He paused. Do you want me to leave? Alara wanted to say yes, wanted him gone so she could fall apart in private. But she was so tired of being alone. Stay, she said. Just over there. Don't come closer. He nodded and leaned against the wall near the door. They stood in silence while Alara's breathing slowly evened out. Why are you doing this? She asked finally. Doing what? All of it. The investigation, the rescue. Opening your home to 2 women you barely know. She looked at him. You could have walked away after seeing me in that window. Could have told yourself it wasn't your problem. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. I had a sister, he said finally. Younger than me. She died when I was 17. Scarlet fever. His jaw tightened. I was away at school. Didn't even know she was sick until I came home for her funeral. I'm sorry. When I saw you in that window, he stopped. Started again. You looked like her. Same expression. Same trapped feeling. like you were drowning and no one could see it. His eyes met hers. I couldn't walk away from that. Alara's throat tightened. I'm not your sister. I know. And I'm not your responsibility. I know that too. He pushed off the wall. But you're here now, and you're safe, and that's all that matters at the moment. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. He left before she could respond. Alara sat on the edge of the bed and put her head in her hands. She'd survived 3 years of imprisonment. She'd survived starvation and isolation and the systematic destruction of her identity. But somehow, kindness felt harder to bear than cruelty. Oh, the first week was a blur of doctors and solicitors and meals she couldn't finish. Her body wasn't used to regular food anymore. Rich broth made her sick. Bread sat in her stomach like lead. Mrs. Davies had to carefully reintroduce solid food in tiny portions, building up slowly to normal meals. It was infuriating. Alara wanted to eat properly, wanted to rebuild her strength, wanted to stop being a fragile invalid who couldn't climb stairs without getting winded. But her body had other ideas. Patience, the doctor said during one of his daily visits. You've sustained significant physical trauma. Recovery will take time. I don't have time. The trial is weeks away. You have time. Alara didn't believe him, but she tried to eat the bland porridge anyway. Lyra was her constant companion. Her sister barely left her side those first days, as if afraid Alara would disappear if she looked away too long. They talked about everything and nothing. About the years Lyra had spent watching Catherine slowly take control of the household, about their father's death and whether it had truly been natural, about the servants who'd been dismissed for asking questions and the ones who'd stayed silent. I tried to visit you, Lyra said one afternoon. They were sitting in the garden, Alara bundled in blankets despite the warm sun. Early on, before Catherine locked everything down, but she caught me and said if I ever went near the East Wing again, she'd send you away for real. So you stopped trying. I stopped visiting. I didn't stop trying. Lyra's voice went fierce. I stole food from the kitchen and bribed servants to leave it in your room. I forged letters to Father's solicitor asking about your legal status. I documented everything I could. Dates, conversations, witnesses. Alara stared at her. You did what? I kept records. In code, hidden in my room. Everything Catherine said, everyone she dismissed, every time she talked about moving you or sedating you or... Lyra's voice cracked. I thought if I couldn't save you myself, at least I could make sure there was evidence. That someone would know the truth. Lyra, I know it wasn't enough. I know I should have done more, should have run away sooner, should have... Alara grabbed her sister's hand. You were a prisoner too, just a different kind. I had freedom. I could have... What? Gone to the authorities? With what proof? A teenage girl accusing her stepmother of imprisoning her sister? Alara shook her head. They would have laughed you out of the room. Or worse, Catherine would have declared you mad too. Lyra was crying now. I was so scared. Of course you were. Fear doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human. Alara pulled her sister close. You stayed. You documented. You tried to help. And when the moment came, you ran for help even though you were terrified. That's bravery. They sat like that for a long time. Two sisters who'd survived the same monster in different ways. Us. The solicitors came next. A firm from London, hired by Rowan, led by a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Hartwell, who listened to Alara's story with the focus of a hunting hawk. Your stepmother made several critical mistakes, she said when Alara finished. First, she never actually committed you to an institution. The paperwork was falsified, but there's no record of admission anywhere in England. That helps us? Immensely. It proves intent to deceive. Second, she continued to draw funds from your father's estate for your care, despite you never receiving any professional treatment. So she was embezzling. Fraud, embezzlement, false imprisonment, attempted murder. We have quite a list. Mrs. Hartwell smiled thinly. Your stepmother's greed will be her downfall. If she'd simply left you in that room without stealing money, the charges would be lighter. But she couldn't resist. Alara felt something cold settle in her chest. Will it be enough to convict her? With your testimony, Lyra's records, the medical reports, and the servants willing to testify? Yes. Absolutely. Mrs. Hartwell paused. But I should warn you, the trial will be brutal. The defense will try to paint you as genuinely mad, will drag up every childhood tantrum and teenage rebellion as evidence of instability. Let them try. They'll attack your credibility, your appearance, your mental state. I said let them try. Alara's voice went hard. I've survived 3 years in a locked room. I can survive a courtroom. Mrs. Hartwell studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. We'll begin preparing your testimony. We'll soon. Rowan kept his distance, which Alara appreciated. He checked on her daily. Brief visits to ask about her health, her comfort, whether she needed anything. But he didn't hover. Didn't treat her like she was broken. It was a relief. Most people looked at her with pity. The servants, the doctors, even Lyra sometimes. But Rowan looked at her like she was a soldier recovering from battle. Wounded, but not defeated. Damaged, but not destroyed. She could work with that. One evening, 2 weeks into her stay, she found him in the library. Walking still exhausted her, but she'd made it down the stairs without help, which felt like a victory. She found him sitting near the fireplace, reading something that looked like military correspondence. Am I interrupting? She asked from the doorway. He looked up. Not at all, please, come in. She made her way to the chair opposite his and collapsed into it with less grace than she would have liked. You walked, he observed. Don't sound so impressed. It was 1 flight of stairs. 3 weeks ago you couldn't stand. Progress is progress. Alara pulled the blanket someone had left on the chair around her shoulders. The room was warm, but she was always cold now. One more gift from 3 years of poor nutrition. I wanted to thank you, she said. You've already thanked me. Several times. Not properly. She met his eyes. You saved my life, both our lives. And you're housing us, feeding us, paying for solicitors and doctors and everything else. I don't know how to repay that. Rowan set down his papers. You don't need to repay anything. Of course I do. Nothing is free. This is. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. You barely know me. I'm not your responsibility, so why go to all this trouble? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those steady gray eyes. Because someone should have, he said finally. 3 years ago, someone should have questioned the story about you being mad, should have demanded to see you, should have noticed that the grieving stepmother seemed far too content with her stepdaughter's disappearance. His jaw tightened. But no one did. And I can't fix that. I can't give you back those 3 years. But I can make sure the next 3 are different. Alara felt her throat close. That's not your burden to carry. Maybe not, but I'm carrying it anyway. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. What happens after the trial? Alara asked eventually. That's up to you. Is it? I have no money, no reputation. Even if Catherine is convicted, society will always see me as the mad girl who was locked away. Then we change their minds. How? Rowan leaned forward. You appear in public. You speak clearly. You show everyone that you're not mad, not broken, not whatever story they've been told. You reclaim your life loudly enough that no one can ignore it. You make it sound simple. It won't be. It'll be hard and exhausting, and there will be days you want to give up. He held her gaze. But you've survived worse. Alara laughed. It sounded rusty. Is that supposed to be encouraging? It's supposed to be true. She studied him, this war-scarred duke who'd decided to adopt 2 broken women as his personal crusade. He was damaged too, she realized. Different scars, different battles, but damaged nonetheless. Maybe that's why he understood. All right, she said. All right, what? I'll do it. The trial, the testimony, the whole public spectacle. She straightened her spine. And afterward, I'll rebuild, somehow. Rowan smiled. Actually smiled, not just the half-twist of his mouth she'd seen before. Good, he said. Because I'd hate to think I went through all this trouble for nothing. Ton. The next day, everything went wrong. Alara woke to shouting in the hallway. She struggled out of bed, legs still weak but functional, and opened her door to chaos. Servants running. Rowan's voice raised in anger. The sound of breaking glass. She stumbled into the corridor and found Lyra pressed against the wall, face white. What's happening? Catherine, Lyra whispered, She posted bail. She's out. Alara's blood went cold. She's what? Her solicitor argued she wasn't a flight risk, and the magistrate agreed she's been released pending trial. That's not possible. Rowan said, Rowan is downstairs right now tearing into the magistrate over it. Lyra grabbed Alara's arm. She sent a message. Catherine, this morning, said if we testify against her, she'll make sure neither of us lives to see the verdict. The floor tilted under Alara's feet. Catherine was free, and she knew exactly where they were. Get her back inside. Rowan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He was taking the stairs 2 at a time, still in his riding coat, mud splattered to his knees. A servant, young, terrified, tried to guide Alara back to her room. She shook him off. Don't touch me. I'm not hiding. Miss Vance, I said no. Rowan reached her, and the look on his face made something in Alara's chest tighten. Not fear, not pity, fury. Inside, now, both of you. Catherine's out, Alara said. Her voice came steadier than she felt. So tell me what you're going to do about it. What I'm going to do is keep you alive long enough to testify. He grabbed her arm, not rough, but firm enough to make his point. Which means you don't stand in hallways making yourself a target. Lyra was already moving, pulling Alara backward. Please, just listen to him. They ended up in Rowan's study, a room Alara hadn't seen before, all dark wood and leather and maps pinned to walls. He locked the door behind them and went straight to the cabinet, pulling out a pistol. He checked the chamber, loaded, set it on the desk within easy reach. Tell me exactly what the message said, he told Lyra. Her sister's hands were shaking. It came this morning, hand-delivered to the kitchen door. The maid brought it to me because it had my name on it. Do you still have it? Lyra pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Rowan took it, read it once, then read it again. His jaw went tight. What does it say? Alara asked. He handed it to her without comment. The handwriting was Catherine's, elegant, controlled, the penmanship of someone who'd been taught that presentation mattered more than substance. My dearest Lyra, I trust you and your sister are enjoying the Duke's hospitality. How convenient that he's taken such an interest in our family affairs. I'm writing to inform you that I've been released from custody pending trial. A misunderstanding, you see. The magistrate realized there was no evidence of wrongdoing, only the accusations of a mentally unstable girl and her impressionable younger sister. I'm willing to put this unfortunate incident behind us. Return home. We'll say Alara had a nervous episode and needed rest. No trial, no scandal, no consequences. But if you insist on this destructive path, if you stand in that courtroom and lie about me, I promise you both will regret it. Accidents happen so easily. Fires. Carriage accidents. Contaminated food. Think carefully about your next choice. Your loving stepmother. Alara's hands didn't shake as she read it. She felt oddly calm. 3 years of imprisonment had burned through most of her capacity for fear. She's not bluffing, she said. I know. So what do we do? Rowan was already moving, pulling maps from drawers, spreading them across his desk. We move the trial up, force the magistrate's hand. If Catherine is convicted quickly, she won't have time to act. And if he refuses? He won't. I have enough dirt on Pemberton to bury him twice over. He'll move the date. Rowan looked at Alara. But until then, you stay here. Locked doors, guards on rotation. No one comes in or out without my approval. So I'm a prisoner again. You're protected. There's a difference? The words came out harder than she meant, but she couldn't stop them. 3 years locked in a room, 2 weeks of freedom, and now back to locked doors and guards because Catherine couldn't let her go. Rowan's expression softened slightly. Yes, there's a difference. This time you have a choice. Do I? You can leave. Right now. I'll give you money, transport, references. You and Lyra can disappear to the continent and never look back. Alara stared at him. You'd let us run. If that's what you want. And Catherine would walk free. His voice went flat. No trial, no justice. She'd keep your inheritance, keep her reputation, and probably find another victim inside 5 years. Silence filled the study. Lyra spoke first. I'm not running. I'm testifying. Lyra, no. Her sister's voice shook but didn't break. I've spent 3 years being afraid of her. I'm done. If I run now, I'll be running forever. Alara looked at her baby sister, barely 20, still soft around the edges, still clinging to the belief that good people won in the end. Catherine should have destroyed that, should have crushed it years ago. But she hadn't, and maybe that was worth something. All right, Alara said. We stay. We testify. We end this. Rowan nodded once. Then we prepare for war, Watts. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Rowan hired additional guards, men he'd served with, soldiers who'd seen real combat and wouldn't spook at shadows. They patrolled the grounds in shifts, checked every delivery, questioned every visitor. The house became a fortress. Mrs. Hartwell arrived with a stack of documents and a grim expression. She spread papers across the drawing room table while Alara and Lyra listened. The trial has been moved up, she said, 4 days from now. Magistrate Pemberton wasn't pleased, but his grace can be very persuasive. 4 days, Alara repeated. That's not much time. It's enough. Your medical reports are damning. The servants' testimonies are consistent. Lyra's records provide documentary evidence. Mrs. Hartwell looked at Alara. But you're the key. Your testimony will determine the verdict. No pressure. I'm not going to lie to you, Miss Vance. This will be brutal. The defense attorney is Harold Wickham. He's good, he's ruthless, and his entire strategy will be to prove you're mentally unstable. I know. He'll ask invasive questions. He'll try to provoke you into emotional reactions. He'll twist your words until black sounds like white. Mrs. Hartwell's gaze didn't waver. Can you handle that? Alara thought about 3 years in a locked room, about starvation and isolation and the slow grinding away of everything that made her human, about surviving when survival seemed impossible. Yes, she said, I can handle it. They spent the next day rehearsing testimony. Mrs. Hartwell played the role of Wickham, throwing question after brutal question at Alara until her head pounded and her voice went hoarse. Why should we believe you weren't violent? If you weren't mad, why didn't you escape sooner? Isn't it true you had episodes of hysteria as a child? How convenient that the Duke appeared just when you needed rescuing. On and on until Alara wanted to scream. But she didn't scream. She answered, calmly, clearly, with the kind of control that came from knowing one mistake could cost her everything. By evening, Mrs. Hartwell looked satisfied. You'll do well. Just remember, tell the truth, stay calm, and don't let Wickham bait you into anger. Easy, Alara muttered after she left. Lyra squeezed her hand. You were brilliant. I was mechanical. You were controlled. That's what matters. But her sister hesitated. Are you scared? Terrified. You? Same. They sat together in the drawing room as daylight faded, two sisters bound by blood and trauma and the slim hope that truth might actually matter. Outside, guards walked their routes. Inside, the house settled into evening quiet. It felt like the calm before a storm. The attack came at midnight. Alara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and for one disorienting moment she was back in that locked room at Thornwood, waiting for Catherine's footsteps in the hall. But this wasn't Thornwood. This was Blackmore House, and someone had just broken a window downstairs. Alara scrambled out of bed, legs still weak but functional, and grabbed the fireplace poker. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The door burst open. She raised the poker. It's me! Rowan, fully dressed, pistol in hand. Get Lyra, now! What's happening? Fire in the east wing. Could be accident, could be arson. Either way, we're not taking chances. He grabbed her arm. Move. They ran down the hallway. Well, Rowan ran. Alara hobbled as fast as her atrophied muscles would allow. He practically dragged her to Lyra's room, kicked open the door, and found her sister already awake and terrified. Get dressed, quickly. Lyra obeyed without question, pulling a dress over her nightgown while Alara struggled into shoes. Smoke was starting to seep under the door. Not thick yet, but enough to make breathing difficult. Is there a back way out? Alara asked. Servants' stairs. But if this is Catherine, then she'll have them covered. Rowan checked the pistol again. Probably. So what's the plan? Get you both out. Kill anyone who tries to stop us. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Stay behind me. Don't stop moving. If I tell you to run, you run. They went. Down the hallway, smoke getting thicker with every step. Down the servants' stairs, narrow, dark, barely wide enough for one person. Rowan went first, gun raised, while Alara helped Lyra navigate the steps. The smoke was worse here. Acrid, burning her throat and lungs. Behind them, somewhere on the upper floor, someone was shouting, guards probably, trying to contain the fire. They reached the ground floor. The kitchen door stood open, and beyond it, two men, rough-looking, armed. Rowan didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. One of the men dropped, screaming, clutching his leg. The other lunged forward, and Rowan met him with the pistol butt to the face. Bone crunched. The man went down. Through the kitchen, Rowan ordered. Go. Alara pulled Lyra forward, stepping over the writhing man, trying not to look at the blood pooling on the floor. They burst into the kitchen, empty, abandoned, fire spreading from the far wall where someone had clearly set it deliberately. The back door stood open. They ran for it. Outside, the night air hit like ice water. Alara gasped, lungs burning, vision swimming. Behind them, Blackmore House was burning, flames climbing the east wall, smoke pouring from broken windows. Guards were running toward the house with buckets. Servants were fleeing in nightclothes. Everything was chaos. The stables, Rowan said. We need horses. They ran. Alara's legs screamed protest with every step. Her vision kept graying at the edges, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and she hadn't survived 3 years in hell just to die in a garden. The stables were dark, too quiet. Rowan held up a hand, stopping them. He listened, watching. Then he turned to Alara and Lyra and mouthed one word, trap. Before anyone could move, figures emerged from the shadows. 4 men, maybe 5. Hard to tell in the darkness. All armed, all blocking the stable entrance. And standing behind them, perfectly composed despite the fire and chaos, was Catherine. She looked exactly like she had at Thornwood. Elegant silk dress, hair perfectly arranged, smile that promised violence wrapped in propriety. Your Grace, she said pleasantly, how kind of you to escort my stepdaughters directly to me. Saves considerable trouble. Rowan raised the pistol. 1 step closer, and I'll kill you myself. With what? You've already fired. That's a single-shot pistol unless I'm very mistaken. Catherine's smile widened. And even if you reload, you're outnumbered. 4 against 1. Poor odds even for a war hero. 5 against 1, Alara said. She stepped forward, still holding the fireplace poker. I'm done being your victim. Catherine laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, darling, you can barely stand. What exactly do you think you're going to do? Whatever I have to. The men moved forward, slowly, predators circling prey. Rowan shifted, putting himself between them and the sisters. His hand was steady on the gun, but Alara could see him calculating distance, angles, probability of success. All of them poor. Last chance, Catherine said. Come home quietly. We'll tell everyone this was a tragic misunderstanding. You'll live. Locked up, certainly, but alive. No, Alara said. Then you'll die. And honestly, that simplifies things considerably. Catherine nodded to her men. Take them. Kill the Duke if he resists. Bring the girls to me alive. The men moved. Rowan fired. The shot caught one man in the chest. He dropped like his strings had been cut. But the others kept coming, and Rowan's pistol was empty. He used it as a club instead, swinging hard, connecting with jaw and temple. One man went down. Another staggered back. But there were too many. Hands grabbed Alara. She fought, swinging the poker wildly, connecting with something that crunched. Someone screamed, but then more hands, stronger hands, wrenching the poker away and pinning her arms. Lyra was screaming, fighting. One of the men hit her, backhanded, casual, and she crumpled. No! Alara tried to pull free. Don't touch her! But she was too weak. 3 years of starvation had left her with nothing but will. And will couldn't break bone or muscle or the iron grip holding her still. Rowan was still fighting, blood on his face, more men closing in. He took another down before someone hit him from behind with something heavy. He dropped. Didn't get up. Enough, Catherine said. The fighting stopped. Alara sagged in her captor's grip, gasping, vision blurring. Around them, Blackmore House burned. Smoke rose into the night sky like a funeral shroud. Catherine walked forward slowly, picking her way across grass and gravel with the care of someone avoiding mud. She stopped in front of Alara. You could have made this easy, she said, almost sad. Could have stayed in that room quietly until you died. Could have let me have what should have been mine from the start. My father's fortune was never yours. Your father was a fool who married up and then married me thinking I'd be satisfied with his scraps. Catherine's voice went cold. I built his business. I ran his household. I made him respectable. And he left everything to his daughters like I was just another servant. So you killed him. I freed myself from a bad investment. Catherine shrugged. And you were supposed to disappear quietly. Instead, you brought a duke into my house, exposed my carefully laid plans, and turned my own stepdaughter against me. She raised her hand. One of the men handed her a knife, not a large knife, not some dramatic weapon, just a simple blade, the kind you'd use to cut bread or trim roses. Catherine tested the edge with her thumb. This will look like you died in the fire, she said conversationally. Tragic accident. The mad girl and her sister caught in the blaze that destroyed the Duke's house. I'll weep beautifully at the funeral. Alara's mind raced. Rowan was down. Lyra was unconscious. The house was burning. Guards were too far away to help. No rescue coming. No last-minute salvation. Just her and Catherine and a knife that would end everything. Do it yourself, Alara said. Catherine paused. What? If you're going to kill me, do it yourself. Don't hide behind hired men. Alara met her stepmother's eyes. Or are you too much of a coward? Something flickered in Catherine's expression. Anger. Real anger. Not the controlled version she usually showed. Let her go, she told the man holding Alara. My lady, I said let her go. They released her. Alara nearly fell. Her legs weren't ready, but she locked her knees and stayed upright through sheer spite. Catherine circled her slowly. You think you're brave. Think you're strong because you survived my little room, but you're not. You're just stubborn. Stubborn enough. For what? Alara smiled. It felt wrong on her face. Feral. To do this. She lunged, not at Catherine, at the man closest to Rowan, the one who'd dropped his cudgel when he'd gone to restrain Lyra. Her fingers closed around wood. She swung. The cudgel caught the man across the temple. He went down hard. Alara kept moving, awkward, stumbling, but moving toward Lyra. Toward her sister who was starting to stir, hand to her bleeding mouth. Get up, Alara gasped. Lyra, get up, we have to… Catherine hit her from behind. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fabric and fury. Catherine had the knife, but Alara had desperation, and desperation fought dirty. She clawed, bit, used elbows and knees and anything else she could manage. Catherine screamed, actual undignified screaming, and tried to stab downward. The knife grazed Alara's shoulder. Pain flared hot and immediate, but Alara grabbed Catherine's wrist, twisted, and heard something pop. Catherine shrieked and dropped the knife. Alara scrambled for it. Her fingers closed around the handle. She rolled, brought the blade up, and froze. Catherine was staring at her, not afraid, not angry, just resigned. Do it, her stepmother said quietly. Kill me. Become exactly what I said you were. Alara's hand shook. She wanted to. Wanted it so badly she could taste it. 3 years of torture and starvation and systematic destruction. This woman had tried to erase her, had tried to kill her sister, had murdered their father and would murder again without hesitation. The world would be better without her. Alara raised the knife. Don't. Rowan's voice, rough, pained, but steady. He was upright again, bleeding from a cut above his eye, swaying slightly, but upright. She deserves it, Alara said. Yes, she does. He moved closer, carefully, like approaching a spooked horse. But killing her makes you a murderer, and murder changes you. Trust me. I don't care. Yes, you do. That's why you're hesitating. Alara looked at the knife, at Catherine, at the woman who'd destroyed 3 years of her life. Behind them, shouts were getting closer. The guards had contained the fire and were now spreading out, searching. Help was coming. Too late to matter, but coming. Alara lowered the knife, not because Catherine deserved mercy, not because killing was wrong, but because surviving wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to live, and living meant walking away from this moment without blood on her hands that would never wash clean. "Tie her up," she told the nearest guard who'd finally arrived. "All of them. And someone help my sister." Then she dropped the knife and sat down hard in the grass, legs finally giving out completely. Rowan lowered himself beside her, moving like every muscle hurt. "You all right?" he asked. "No, you?" "Not even remotely." They sat there together while guards swarmed the area, while Lyra was helped to her feet, while Catherine was bound and dragged away, still screaming threats. Blackmore House burned behind them. The east wing was gone. The rest was salvageable, maybe, but tonight it was just fire and smoke and destruction. "I'm sorry about your house," Ilara said. Rowan laughed. It sounded pained. "Houses can be rebuilt. Still. She came to kill you, tonight. If we hadn't moved fast—" He stopped. Started again. "I should have seen it coming." "How? You're not psychic." "I'm supposed to be strategic, supposed to anticipate threats." His voice went flat. 3 men died tonight. Guards, good men, because I didn't prepare for arson and assault simultaneously. Alara looked at him, this duke who'd saved her life, who'd given her shelter, who was now bleeding and traumatized and blaming himself for not being perfect. "Stop," she said. "Stop what?" "Carrying everything. You're not responsible for Catherine's choices. You're not responsible for every outcome. You're just a man who did his best. My best nearly got you killed. Your best saved me, multiple times." She grabbed his hand, held it. "I'm alive because of you. Lyra's alive because of you. Don't turn that into another failure." He looked at their joined hands like he didn't quite understand what he was seeing. Then he nodded. Once. Sharp. Around them, guards were securing the perimeter. Servants were salvaging what they could from the house. Someone had brought blankets and was wrapping Lyra in one. The chaos was contained, but Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Catherine had failed tonight, but the trial was in 3 days, and desperate people made terrible choices. They moved to an inn in the village for the night. Well, morning, technically. Dawn was breaking by the time everyone was accounted for, injuries tended, and lodging secured. Alara shared a room with Lyra. Neither of them slept. They sat by the window and watched the sun rise over the countryside that looked too peaceful for what had just happened. "She almost killed us," Lyra said eventually. "I know." "She would have, if you hadn't fought back." "I know that too." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "I've never seen you like that before. When you grabbed the cudgel, when you fought her, you were—" She trailed off. "Violent?" "Fierce." Alara looked at her hands. There was blood under her fingernails. Catherine's? One of the men's? She didn't know. 3 years in that room changed me, she said quietly. I don't think I'm the person I was before. None of us are. No, but I'm... She searched for the word. Sharper. Angrier. I used to believe in fairness and justice and the essential goodness of people. Now I just believe in survival. That's not true. Isn't it? I almost killed her tonight, Lyra. I wanted to. I had the knife and the opportunity and every reason, and the only thing that stopped me was... She stopped. I don't even know what stopped me. You stopped yourself, Lyra said firmly, because you're still you. Damaged, yes. Changed, absolutely. But still the sister who used to read me stories and teach me about stars and tell me everything would be all right, even when it wasn't. Alara's throat tightened. Everything isn't all right. Not yet, but it will be, after the trial, after Catherine is convicted, after we get our lives back. Lyra grabbed her hand. We will get them back, I know it. Alara wanted to believe her, but 3 years of captivity had taught her that hope was dangerous. Still, she squeezed her sister's hand back. All right, I'll try. The trial began 2 days later. Catherine had been denied bail this time. Attempted murder of a peer had consequences even corrupt magistrates couldn't ignore. She sat in the dock looking pale but composed, wearing black silk like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. The courtroom was packed. Gentry from 3 counties had shown up to watch the spectacle. The mad heiress versus her stepmother. The scandal of the decade. Alara sat in the witness gallery with Lyra, both of them dressed in the most respectable clothes they owned, borrowed from Rowan's staff, altered to fit. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Every eye in the room was on her. Mrs. Hartwell stood. "The Crown calls Miss Alara Vance." Alara rose. Her legs shook. Her hands were ice. But she walked to the witness box with her head high and her spine straight. She'd survived Catherine's prison. She could survive this. The bailiff swore her in. She placed her hand on the Bible and promised to tell the truth. Then Mrs. Hartwell began. "Miss Vance, please tell the court what happened 3 years ago." Alara took a breath and began the story of how she'd been erased. She spoke clearly, calmly. No tears, no dramatics, just facts. Her father's death, Catherine's increasing control, the night she'd been dragged to the East Wing and locked inside, the starvation, the isolation, the years of waiting for rescue that never came. The courtroom was silent. When she finished, Mrs. Hartwell asked, "And during these 3 years, did Lady Catherine ever express remorse?" "No. She told me I was an inconvenience, that my inheritance should have been hers, that I'd stay locked up until I either died or went genuinely mad." "Thank you, Miss Vance." Mrs. Hartwell sat. Harold Wickham stood. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that inspired trust. Grandfatherly, kind, a complete lie. "Miss Vance," he began gently, "I'm so sorry for what you've endured. It must have been terrible." Trap. This was a trap. "Yes," Alara said carefully, "and I'm sure your memory of events is colored by that trauma." "My memory is accurate." "Of course. But trauma does affect perception, doesn't it? Makes us remember things in certain ways, magnifies grievances, creates narratives that might not match reality. My stepmother locked me in a room for 3 years. That's not a narrative. That's fact." Wickham smiled sadly. "Or perhaps you were placed in that room for your own safety. Because you were experiencing mental distress, and in your confused state, you've misinterpreted kindness as cruelty." "I wasn't confused. Your father's death must have been devastating." "It was. And shortly after, you began having episodes, violent outbursts, periods where you couldn't remember what you'd done." He said it so smoothly, like it was established fact. "That's not true. Isn't it? We have testimony from servants that you destroyed furniture, threatened staff, wandered the halls at night talking to people who weren't there." "Those are lies." "Are they? Or have you simply forgotten?" Alara's hands clenched on the witness box rail. "I haven't forgotten anything. I was locked in that room and starved, and you were given appropriate medical care for your condition. I was given barely enough food to survive." "According to whom?" "Your memory? The same memory affected by 3 years of mental illness." He was twisting everything. Every answer she gave, he spun into evidence of instability. Mrs. Hartwell objected twice. The judge sustained once, overruled the other. Wickham kept going. "Miss Vance, isn't it true that His Grace, the Duke of Blackmore, promised you wealth and comfort if you testified against Lady Catherine?" "No. But he's been very generous. Housed you, fed you, paid for your legal representation. Because he's a decent human being. Or because he has his own reasons for wanting Lady Catherine disgraced." Wickham leaned forward. "Tell me, what is your relationship with the Duke?" The courtroom buzzed. Alara went cold. There's no relationship. He rescued you, took you into his home, fought for you. Sounds rather romantic, doesn't it? Sounds like compassion. Or perhaps infatuation. Perhaps he's convinced himself you're some tragic figure who needs saving. And perhaps you've encouraged that belief to secure your position. That's disgusting. Is it? Or is it simply human nature? A young woman, desperate and alone, attaching herself to a wealthy protector? Mrs. Hartwell shot to her feet. "Objection! Counsel is attacking the witness's character without any evidence." Sustained. "Mr. Wickham, confine yourself to relevant questions." But the damage was done. Alara could feel the shift in the courtroom, the whispers, the sidelong glances. Wickham had planted doubt. Mad girl. Manipulative girl. Girl who'd seduce a duke to get revenge on her stepmother. He asked more questions, each one designed to chip away at her credibility before finally releasing her back to her seat. Alara sat down feeling like she'd been flayed. Lyra grabbed her hand. You did well. I didn't. He destroyed me. He tried, but the jury saw through it. Alara looked at the 12 men in the jury box. Their expressions ranged from sympathetic to skeptical to outright hostile. She wasn't sure Lyra was right. The trial continued. More witnesses. The doctor who'd examined her. Guards who'd testified to the attack at Blackmore House. Servants who'd worked at Thornwood and remembered Alara before her imprisonment. Each one added weight to the case. But Wickham cross-examined them all with the same surgical precision, finding inconsistencies, planting doubt, building his counter-narrative. By the time the court adjourned for the day, Alara felt hollowed out. They returned to the inn. Rowan was waiting. He took one look at Alara's face and poured her whiskey without asking. She drank it, hated the burn. Drank it anyway. Wickham's good, she said. I know. He made me sound like a liar, a madwoman, a manipulative. I know, Rowan interrupted gently, but the jury also heard the medical evidence, the documented starvation, the locked room. They can't ignore that. Can't they? He had no answer. That night, Alara lay awake in her room and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe she should have run, disappeared to the continent, changed her name and never looked back. At least then she'd be free. Instead, she was trapped in a different kind of prison, one made of courtrooms and testimony and public scrutiny. And Catherine was sitting across from her, smiling like she'd already won. The next morning, Alara woke to Lyra shaking her shoulder. Get up, you need to see this. She dragged herself out of bed, every muscle protesting. Yesterday's testimony had left her feeling like she'd been trampled by horses. But Lyra's face was flushed with something that looked almost like excitement. What is it? Just come. Downstairs, the inn's common room was packed with people. Servants, villagers, people Alara had never seen before, all talking in hushed, urgent tones. Rowan stood near the fireplace reading something. When he saw her, he held up a newspaper. You made the front page. Alara's stomach dropped. That can't be good. Read it. She took the paper. The headline screamed across the top. Duke exposes heiress imprisoned for 3 years. Stepmother on trial for attempted murder. Below it, a detailed account of the trial so far. Her testimony. The medical evidence. The attack at Blackmore House. But what caught her attention was the editorial at the bottom. The courtroom testimony of Miss Alara Vance yesterday was remarkable, not for its drama, though there was plenty, but for its restraint. Here was a young woman who, by all accounts, has endured systematic torture at the hands of her own family, speaking with clarity and composure that would put seasoned barristers to shame. Mr. Wickham's attempts to paint her as unstable or manipulative fell flat against the weight of physical evidence. Miss Vance weighs perhaps 7 stones soaking wet, a testament to 3 years of starvation, not mental illness. Her measured responses and refusal to descend into hysteria spoke volumes about her character. This editor believes we are witnessing not a trial of guilt versus innocence, but of truth versus comfortable lies. Society would prefer to believe that proper ladies like Lady Catherine don't commit such atrocities. That madness is the only explanation for a young woman's disappearance. But the evidence suggests otherwise. And Miss Vance's testimony, delivered with unflinching honesty, demands we face that uncomfortable truth. Alara lowered the paper slowly. Who wrote this? Thomas Crawford. He's the most widely read columnist in London. Rowan was watching her carefully. His pieces get reprinted in every major paper in England. By tonight, half the country will have read his opinion on your case. That's not possible. It's already happening. Look. He gestured to the window. Outside, more people were arriving. Not gentry, common folk. Women in work dresses, men in laborers' clothes. They gathered in clusters, talking, pointing at the courthouse. Word spread overnight, Lyra said quietly. People are calling you brave, saying if you can stand up to someone like Catherine, maybe they can stand up to their own injustices. Alara felt dizzy. I'm not brave, I'm just surviving. Rowan finished. But sometimes survival looks like courage to people who've never had to fight for it. Mrs. Hartwell burst through the door, looking harried but triumphant. Have you seen the papers? Just now. Every major publication in London has picked up the story. The Times, the Telegraph, even the illustrated news sheets. She spread them across the table, headline after headline, all variations on the same theme. Public opinion is turning. This is exactly what we needed. How does public opinion help in a courtroom? Alara asked. Because juries don't exist in a vacuum. They read papers. They talk to their neighbors. They're influenced by what society thinks. Mrs. Hartwell looked fierce. Yesterday, Wickham tried to make you look like a liar and a seductress. But today, you're a symbol, and symbols are very hard to convict of lying. So what happens now? Now we press the advantage. Today's witnesses are the servants Catherine dismissed over the years. Tomorrow we call Lyra, and then, Mrs. Hartwell smiled grimly, we rest our case and watch Wickham try to defend the indefensible. The courtroom was even more packed than the day before. People stood in the aisles, pressed against walls. The gallery was full of women, housemaids, governesses, shopgirls, all watching with the intensity of people who saw themselves in Alara's story. Catherine noticed it too. Alara watched her stepmother's face tighten as she surveyed the crowd. This wasn't the audience she'd expected. Not society matrons who'd sympathize with propriety, not gentlemen who'd defer to class. These were people who knew what powerlessness felt like. The first witness was a former cook named Mrs. Davies, no relation to Rowan's housekeeper, who'd worked at Thornwood for 15 years before being dismissed. Mrs. Hartwell led her through testimony methodically. Can you describe Miss Alara's behavior before she was confined? Normal as any young lady. Bit spirited, maybe. Read too much. Liked to argue philosophy with her father. Mrs. Davies smiled slightly. But nothing mad about her, nothing violent. And after her father died? Lady Catherine changed everything. Started dismissing servants who'd been there for years. Brought in new staff, people loyal to her, not the family. And she started being cruel to Miss Alara. Small things at first. Criticism, isolation. Then it got worse. How so? She'd lock Miss Alara in her room for days at a time, said it was for the girl's own good that she was having episodes, but I never saw any episodes. Just a grieving girl who couldn't stand her stepmother. Wickham's cross-examination was brutal. He accused Mrs. Davies of resentment over being fired, suggested she was lying to get revenge, implied her memory was faulty. But Mrs. Davies held firm. I know what I saw, sir, and I saw a good girl being destroyed by a wicked woman. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. Order! But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. The crowd had heard it. And they believed her. 2 more servants testified. Similar stories. All dismissed after questioning Catherine's treatment of Alara. All with clear memories of a sane, healthy young woman who'd been systematically isolated. By lunch, the courtroom mood had shifted. Catherine was no longer the grieving stepmother dealing with a mad stepdaughter. She was the villain, and everyone could feel it. Bah. During the recess, Alara found a quiet corner of the courthouse and tried to breathe. The attention was overwhelming. Everywhere she went, people stared, whispered. Some reached out to touch her hand or offer encouragement. It should have felt validating. Instead, it felt like drowning. You need to eat something. Rowan appeared with bread and cheese wrapped in cloth. He sat beside her without asking permission. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday morning. You're going to collapse. Maybe that would be better. Alara, don't. She looked at him. Don't tell me I'm doing well or that this is almost over or any of the comforting lies people keep saying. I'm exhausted. I'm terrified. And I don't know if I can do this for another day. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when I was in the Crimea, there was a battle that lasted 3 days. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and losing ground every hour. By the second day, half my men wanted to retreat, said it was hopeless. What did you do? I told them the truth, that yes, it was hopeless. Yes, we were probably going to die, but we'd die on our feet, fighting, instead of running and dying tired. He handed her the bread. Sometimes the only choice is between different kinds of hard, and you get to pick which hard you can live with. Alara took the bread, ate a bite. It tasted like dust, but she forced it down. Did you win? The battle? We survived. That's close enough. They sat together until the bailiff called them back inside. The afternoon session began with Lyra taking the stand. She looked small in the witness box. Young, fragile, but when she started speaking, her voice was steady. Mrs. Hartwell guided her through 3 years of observations. The locked door, the forbidden wing, the way Catherine had threatened and manipulated, the coded records Lyra had kept, documenting every suspicious conversation and dismissed servant. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Mrs. Hartwell asked. "I was afraid. Catherine made it clear what would happen if I spoke. She said I'd be sent away, that no one would believe me, that I'd be declared mad just like my sister." Lyra's voice wavered slightly. "But when the Duke found Alara, I realized I had a choice: stay silent and safe, or speak up and risk everything." "And you chose to speak." "I chose my sister." The courtroom was silent. Wickham stood for cross-examination. He tried his usual tactics, questioning her memory, suggesting she'd been manipulated by Alara or the Duke, implying sisterly loyalty was clouding her judgment. But Lyra had something he hadn't anticipated. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I kept records," she said. 3 years of dates and conversations and evidence. Every time Catherine dismissed a servant for asking about Alara. Every time she mentioned sedating her or moving her. Every lie she told about where my sister was. Lyra held up the notebook. "It's all here. In code so Catherine wouldn't find it. But it's all here." Mrs. Hartwell was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit this as evidence." The judge examined the notebook, flipped through pages of cramped handwriting and careful documentation. His expression grew grimmer with each page. "Admitted," he said. "Mr. Wickham, you'll have time to review this during recess." But Wickham looked shaken. This wasn't a memory he could attack or a witness he could discredit. This was documentation, proof. The defense was crumbling. That evening, back at the inn, Alara held Lyra's notebook and read through 3 years of her sister's careful rebellion. The entries were brief but devastating. September 14th, 1844. Catherine dismissed Mrs. Davies today. Said she was stealing, but I heard them arguing about the locked east wing. Mrs. Davies asked why Alara couldn't receive visitors. October 3rd, 1844. Heard Catherine talking to her solicitor about Alara's inheritance. Said it would be hers within the year if nature takes its course. December 25th, 1844. Christmas. Catherine sent me gifts and put on a show for visitors. Asked if I wanted to see Alara. When I said yes, she said my sister was too ill for visitors. But I saw a servant carrying food to the East Wing, barely enough for one meal. March 12th, 1845. Dr. Whitmore visited. I listened at the door. He never examined Alara, just signed papers Catherine gave him. She paid him £50. On and on, page after page of careful documentation. "How did you do this?" Alara asked. Lyra shrugged. "I couldn't save you, but I could record what was happening, make sure someone knew, even if that someone was just me." She hesitated. "I used to read it to myself at night, remind myself I wasn't going mad, that you were real and what was happening was real, and someday it would matter." Alara pulled her sister into a fierce hug. "It matters. You mattered. You saved me as much as Rowan did. I should have done more." "You did enough." "More than enough." Alara pulled back. "Tomorrow, when they call Catherine to testify, I want to be there. I want to watch her try to explain this away." Lyra smiled. It looked almost feral. "Good. Because I want to watch too." Now, Catherine took the stand the next morning wearing widow's black and an expression of wounded dignity. Wickham led her through a carefully constructed narrative. The devoted stepmother, the troubled stepdaughter, the impossible situation. "Lady Catherine, can you tell the court why you made the difficult decision to confine your stepdaughter?" "It broke my heart," Catherine said. Her voice trembled with just the right amount of emotion. But Alara was a danger to herself and others. After her father died, she became violent, destructive. She attacked servants, destroyed property. I consulted doctors who confirmed she needed constant supervision. And the East Wing room? Was for her safety, furnished comfortably. She had books, a proper bed, regular meals. That's a lie. The voice came from the gallery. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood, working-class dress, weathered hands, stern expression. I cleaned that room for 2 years before I was dismissed. There was nothing comfortable about it. Bare walls, thin mattress, one small window with bars. The judge banged his gavel. Order, madam, you cannot interrupt. I have a right to speak truth when I hear lies. The woman's voice carried. That girl was starved and abused, and everyone knew it. We just didn't say nothing because we needed our positions. Other voices joined in. Servants in the gallery, shopkeepers, people from the village surrounding Thornwood. I delivered food to that house. Never enough for what they claimed. My sister worked there, said Lady Catherine was cruel. You see? Everyone knew something was wrong, but she had money and power. The courtroom descended into chaos. The judge hammered his gavel repeatedly. Order! I will clear this courtroom if necessary. But the dam had broken. Years of whispered suspicions and ignored evidence were pouring out. Mrs. Hartwell stood calmly and waited for silence. When it finally came, she approached Catherine with the careful precision of someone handling explosives. Lady Catherine, you claim Miss Alara received regular, adequate meals. How do you explain her current weight of approximately 7 stone when medical records show she weighed 11 stone before her confinement? The stress of her illness, 4 stone of weight loss, is starvation, not stress. Correct? She refused to eat, did she? Mrs. Hartwell held up a document. We have testimony from 3 servants that food portions to the East Wing were deliberately minimal. 1 meal per day, often spoiled. That's not refusal to eat. That's enforced starvation. Catherine's composure was cracking. Those servants were dismissed for theft. All of them? Every single person who questioned your treatment of Miss Alara happened to be a thief? Mrs. Hartwell's voice sharpened. Or were they dismissed because they knew too much? I did what was necessary. You did what was profitable. Your late husband left his estate to his daughters, but if both daughters were declared incompetent or deceased, the estate would revert to you. Correct? Silence. Lady Catherine, please answer the question. The estate was managed according to my husband's wishes. Your husband's will specified the estate would pass to his daughters upon your death or remarriage. But if those daughters were incapacitated or dead, you would retain control indefinitely. Isn't that true? Catherine's face went white. I loved those girls. You loved their inheritance. Mrs. Hartwell pulled out financial records. Records show you withdrew funds from the estate for medical care of Miss Alara. Thousands of pounds over 3 years. But Miss Alara received no medical care. Where did that money go? There were expenses. Yes, your dressmaker, your jeweler, your trips to London. Mrs. Hartwell spread the receipts across the rail. You stole from the very woman you were torturing. You embezzled funds meant for her care to finance your own lifestyle. That's not... I had every right. You had no rights. Those funds were held in trust for Miss Alara's benefit. Instead, you used them for yourself while she starved in a locked room. Mrs. Hartwell's voice went cold. And when your comfortable arrangement was threatened, you attempted murder. You set fire to the Duke's house with both sisters inside. You hired men to kill anyone who tried to stop you. No! We have witnesses. We have your hired men in custody. One of them testified yesterday that you paid them £500 to ensure Miss Alara and Miss Lyra didn't survive the fire. The courtroom erupted again. Catherine was screaming now, composure completely shattered. She deserved it. That spoiled, ungrateful girl who had everything handed to her while I worked and scraped and smiled through years of being treated like a servant in my own home. Your home? Mrs. Hartwell's voice cut through the noise. It was never your home. It was Richard Vance's home, his daughter's home. You were a guest who decided to become a tyrant. I earned that house. I built that fortune with him, and he left it all to 2 stupid girls who didn't appreciate... She stopped. Too late. The courtroom was dead silent. Catherine seemed to realize what she'd just said. Her face went gray. Mrs. Hartwell smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Alara spent that hour in a small room off the courthouse main hall, unable to sit still, pacing like a caged animal. Lyra tried to calm her. Rowan offered whiskey. She refused both. She just walked back and forth, while her mind spun through possibilities. What if they found Catherine innocent? What if her confession wasn't enough? What if— "They're coming back," the bailiff's voice from the doorway. Alara's heart stopped. They filed back into the courtroom. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls. The tension was thick enough to cut. Catherine sat in the dock looking smaller than before, broken. The foreman of the jury stood. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of false imprisonment, how do you find?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered for order. "On the charge of fraud and embezzlement?" "Guilty." "On the charge of attempted murder?" The foreman looked directly at Catherine. "Guilty." The noise was deafening. People shouting, cheering. Catherine was screaming something, but Alara couldn't hear it over the roar. She just stood there, frozen, while the word echoed in her mind. Guilty. 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 It was over. 3 years of imprisonment, weeks of fear, days of brutal testimony, and it was over. "Alara." She turned. Lyra was crying, smiling, grabbing her hands. "It's over. She's guilty. It's over." "It's over," Alara repeated. The words felt strange, foreign. The judge was sentencing Catherine now. 20 years transportation to Australia for attempted murder. Additional time for the other charges. Seizure of all property obtained through fraud. Catherine was still screaming. 2 bailiffs had to physically drag her from the courtroom while she shrieked threats and curses. Alara watched her go. The woman who'd stolen 3 years of her life, who'd tried to erase her existence, who'd almost succeeded, being dragged away in chains. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it just felt quiet, like the end of a long scream that had been echoing in her head for years. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was massive. People everywhere, servants, workers, shopgirls, all cheering and calling her name. Women reached out to touch her hand. Men tipped their hats. "You did it! Justice for Miss Vance! She got what she deserved!" Alara felt overwhelmed, disconnected, like she was watching this happen to someone else. Rowan appeared at her elbow, solid and steady. "Come on, let's get you out of here before this turns into a riot." He guided her through the crowd toward a waiting carriage. Lyra followed close behind, still crying happy tears. They climbed inside and the driver took off at speed. The noise faded. Alara leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. "You all right?" Rowan asked. "I don't know. Ask me in a week." Lyra laughed. It sounded slightly hysterical. "We won. We actually won." "You won," Rowan corrected. "Both of you. You stood up and told the truth and it mattered." Alara opened her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now? The estate reverts to you. Catherine's debts and embezzlement will be sorted out by solicitors, but you're the rightful heir. Thornwood Manor is yours." "I don't want it." The words came out flat, final. Rowan and Lyra both stared at her. "That house is a prison," Alara said. "I don't care if I own it. I never want to see it again." "Then sell it," Rowan said. "Or tear it down. Or let it rot. It's yours to do with as you please." "What will you do?" Lyra asked quietly. Alara thought about it. About freedom. About choices. About the future that suddenly stretched ahead of her. Empty and terrifying and hers. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I'll figure it out. Without anyone locking me in rooms or telling me I'm mad or trying to steal what's mine." She looked at her sister. "What about you?" "I want to help people. Women who are trapped like you were. Find them. Document their situations. Make enough noise that someone has to listen." Lyra's voice strengthened. "Catherine isn't the only person doing this. There are girls locked away all over England, declared mad by families who want their money or their silence. If I can help even one of them—" "You will," Alara said. "You'll help dozens, hundreds, maybe." They rode in silence for a while. Then Lyra said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For surviving, for fighting back, for showing me it was possible." She grabbed Alara's hand. "I thought you were dead. For 3 years I thought Catherine had killed you, and I'd never know for sure. But you survived, and that meant I could survive too." Alara squeezed back. "We both survived. That's what matters." The carriage rolled on through countryside that looked impossibly green and alive. Spring was coming. The world was waking up. And for the first time in 3 years, Alara felt like she might wake up too. That night, at the inn, there was a celebration. Not a large one. Just Rowan, Alara, Lyra, Mrs. Hartwell, and a few of the servants who'd testified. Wine and simple food, and the kind of quiet relief that comes after a long war finally ends. Mrs. Hartwell raised her glass. To justice, and to the two bravest women I've ever met. They drank. Alara felt the wine burn down her throat and settle warm in her stomach. She was exhausted, wrung out. But underneath the exhaustion was something new. Hope, maybe. Or just the absence of fear. Hard to tell the difference. Rowan found her later standing by the window and looking at stars. "You should be celebrating," he said. "I am, quietly." "That was well done today. In the courtroom. You didn't break." "I wanted to." "But you didn't. That's what matters." He was quiet for a moment. "What will you do now? Really?" Alara considered. "Learn how to be a person again, I suppose. Figure out who I am when I'm not just surviving. Try to sleep without nightmares. Eat regular meals. Walk without getting winded." She glanced at him. "Maybe travel. See places that aren't locked rooms or courthouses. You're welcome to stay at Blackmore as long as you need, both of you." "I know, but I think I need to stand on my own eventually. Not right away, but eventually." She paused. "Thank you for everything. For seeing me in that window and deciding I mattered enough to save. You did that yourself. I just provided logistics. You provided hope. That's harder." They stood together, watching stars, and Alara felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The jury had said guilty. Society had called her brave. But the only verdict that really mattered was the one she'd give herself when enough time had passed to think clearly. And right now, standing here, free and alive and victorious, that verdict was still pending. But for the first time in 3 years, she thought it might eventually come back in her favor. The next morning, everything felt different. Not easier, not perfect, but different. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she could open herself, in a room she could leave whenever she wanted, wearing a nightgown that actually fit instead of hanging off her skeletal frame like a shroud. Small things. But small things mattered when you'd been denied them for years. She made it downstairs without help. Slowly, still weak, but under her own power. The inn's common room was quieter than yesterday. Most of the celebration crowd had dispersed, leaving only a few early risers and travelers. Lyra was already there, reading a newspaper with her tea. "You're up early," Alara said. "Couldn't sleep. Too much happened yesterday." Lyra pushed the paper toward her. "We're famous, or infamous. Hard to tell the difference." Alara scanned the headlines. More coverage of the trial. Editorials about justice and class, and the treatment of women. One particularly dramatic illustration showed her standing in the witness box, looking far more heroic than she'd felt. "They're making me into some kind of symbol," she said. "You are a symbol, whether you want to be or not. I just wanted justice. You got that, and you showed other people they could get it too." Lyra set down her teacup. "3 women came to me yesterday after the verdict, all with similar stories, fathers or husbands who declared them incompetent to steal their property. They wanted to know if I could help them fight back." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd try. That I couldn't promise anything, but I'd document their cases and find them solicitors who'd listen." Lyra's expression was fierce. "Catherine isn't the only monster out there. She's just the one we managed to stop." Alara felt pride swell in her chest. Her baby sister, soft-hearted Lyra, who used to cry over injured birds, had grown steel in her spine. "You're going to change things," Alara said. "We're going to change things. If you'll help me." "Lyra, I can barely walk upstairs without getting winded. I'm not exactly crusader material." "You stood in a courtroom and faced down the woman who tortured you for 3 years. You're exactly crusader material." Lyra grabbed her hand. "I know you're tired. I know you want to rest. But the world just watched you win, And there are dozens, maybe hundreds, of women watching and hoping they can win too. If we do nothing now, we waste what we fought for. Alara wanted to refuse, wanted to say she'd done enough, suffered enough, given enough. But Lyra was right. Justice for one woman was good. Justice for hundreds was better. "All right," she said, "but slowly. I need time to heal first." "We have time. Catherine's on a ship to Australia. We can afford to be patient." Rowan appeared in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept much either. "Morning. There's someone here to see you both." "Who?" "The magistrate, Pemberton. He says it's urgent." Alara and Lyra exchanged glances. Urgent didn't sound good. They found Pemberton in the inn's private parlor, hat in hand, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Miss Vance! Miss Lyra!" He bowed slightly. "Thank you for seeing me." "What do you want?" Alara asked. She was too tired for pleasantries. "To apologize. And to explain." Pemberton sat without being invited. "I should never have granted Lady Catherine bail. There's no excuse. She had influence, connections, and I was under considerable pressure from certain members of society who felt the charges were overblown. She tried to murder us. I know, I should have seen that. Should have prioritized safety over propriety." He looked genuinely ashamed. "I wanted you to know that your case, your testimony, has prompted me to review other similar cases. Women declared incompetent or mad by family members without proper medical evaluation." "How many?" Lyra asked. "In this county alone? At least 15. Nationally?" He shook his head. "Hundreds, I suspect. Perhaps thousands. Most without anyone fighting for them the way His Grace fought for you." Alara felt sick. So Catherine wasn't unique. She was bolder than most, more ruthless, but the practice of locking away inconvenient women, daughters, wives, sisters, it's disturbingly common. Pemberton met her eyes. "I want to change that. I'm proposing new regulations requiring independent medical evaluation before anyone can be committed, requiring regular inspections of private facilities, making it harder to simply disappear someone." "That'll take years," Lyra said. "Legislation, approval, implementation? Yes, but it's necessary. And your case provides the momentum. Public opinion is on your side. Use it." After he left, Alara sat in silence for a long moment. "He's right," she said finally. "We have a window, public attention, sympathy. If we're going to do something, it has to be now." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we don't wait for legislation. We create an organization, something that documents cases of false imprisonment, provides legal assistance, and makes enough noise that authorities have to pay attention." Alara's mind was working now, spinning through possibilities. "We use my inheritance, what's left of it after Catherine's embezzlement, to fund it. Hire solicitors, investigators, create a network." Lyra was grinning. "That's brilliant. It's ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but possible, especially with the Duke's support." Lyra glanced toward the door. "He'd help, wouldn't he?" "Probably, but I don't want to rely on him forever. This has to be ours." "Ours," Lyra agreed. "The Vance Foundation, or something less pretentious. The Freedom Society? Too dramatic. The Liberation Project? Too political." They spent the next hour throwing names back and forth, each more ridiculous than the last, until they were both laughing too hard to continue. It felt good to laugh. Felt like being alive. A week later, they returned to Thornwood Manor. Alara had resisted, didn't want to see that place again, didn't want to walk those halls or smell that air or feel those walls pressing in. But the solicitors needed her there to sign papers, to officially take control of the estate, to close that chapter. The carriage ride felt like traveling backward through time. Same roads, same countryside, same approach through gates that had once meant prison, but different now, because she was arriving as the owner, not the prisoner. The staff was waiting, what was left of them. Most of Catherine's people had fled or been dismissed. The remaining servants looked nervous and ashamed, clustered in the entry hall like children awaiting punishment. Alara stood in the doorway and looked at them. "I'm not going to fire you," she said, "unless you actively helped Catherine imprison me. If you did, leave now. I'll give you references and a month's wages and we'll never speak again." 3 servants exchanged glances and quietly departed. The rest stayed. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. This house is being sold. I want nothing to do with it. You'll all have positions until the sale is finalized, and I'll provide references for whatever comes next. Alara's voice was steady. I know some of you knew what was happening, knew I was locked in that room, and you did nothing. Silence. I'm not going to pretend that's acceptable, but I also understand fear. Understand needing your position to survive. So I'm offering one chance. If any of you have information about other women in similar situations, other families doing what Catherine did, tell me now. Help me stop it from happening to someone else. A young maid stepped forward. My lady, my cousin. She's locked away by her uncle. He says she's hysterical, but she's just trying to keep her inheritance. I don't know how to help her. Give me her name and location. I'll send someone to investigate. An older footman spoke next. I heard rumors about the Ashworth family. They have a daughter no one's seen in years. Supposedly she's in an asylum, but write it down. Every rumor, every suspicion. I want names. By the time she finished, she had a list of 12 potential cases. 12 women who might be locked away right now, waiting for rescue that would never come, unless someone made it come. Alara climbed to the east wing alone. Lyra offered to come. Rowan insisted on it, but she needed to do this by herself. The door was unlocked now, standing open. She walked through corridors that had once been her entire world, past the servants' stairs where Lyra had smuggled food, past the corner where she'd counted stones in the wall because there was nothing else to count, to her room. It looked smaller than she remembered, dingier. The walls were stained with damp. The window glass was cracked. The bed was exactly as she'd left it. Thin mattress, threadbare blanket, the kind of setup you'd give someone you wanted to forget about. Alara stood in the doorway and felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, not even satisfaction that it was over. Just emptiness. This room had defined 3 years of her life, had been her prison, her torture chamber, her entire universe. And now it was just a room, small, shabby, meaningless. I win, she said aloud, to the room, to Catherine, to the ghosts of those 3 years. You tried to break me and you failed. I'm still here and you're gone. The words echoed off bare walls. Then she turned and walked away. Down the stairs, through the house, out the front door into sunlight that felt almost too bright. Rowan was waiting by the carriage. How do you feel? Like I just said goodbye to something that doesn't deserve goodbyes. Alara climbed in. Let's go. I never want to see this place again. As the carriage pulled away, she looked back once. Thornwood Manor stood gray and imposing against cloudy skies, all stone and history and secrets. It had almost killed her, but it hadn't, and that was enough. 3 months passed. The estate sale went through. Thornwood Manor was purchased by a merchant family from Manchester who wanted the prestige of owning a country house and didn't care about its history. Alara used the money to establish what they eventually called the Advocacy Society, a deliberately boring name for a revolutionary idea. They rented offices in London, hired 2 solicitors who specialized in family law, brought on investigators to document cases, created a network of safe houses for women fleeing dangerous situations. Word spread quickly. Women wrote letters, sent pleas. Some arrived in person, desperate and terrified, with stories that made Alara's 3 years seem almost merciful by comparison. A wife locked in an attic for 10 years because she'd questioned her husband's business dealings. A daughter committed to a private asylum because she'd refused an arranged marriage. A widow whose son had declared her incompetent to steal her late husband's fortune. The stories were endless, and the society fought back. Not every case was winnable. Some women had been imprisoned so long they'd actually gone mad. Some families had resources to fight legal challenges. Some simply disappeared their victims before the society could intervene. But they won enough. Enough to make a difference. Enough to make people afraid. Enough that families started being more careful about declaring women incompetent because someone might actually investigate. Alara threw herself into the work with single-minded intensity. She attended meetings, reviewed cases, testified in courts when needed. She was still weak, still recovering from 3 years of malnutrition, but determination compensated for physical strength. Lyra handled the documentation and outreach, building a network of informants and allies across England. She was brilliant at it. Natural. Her gentle demeanor put people at ease while her sharp mind caught every useful detail. They made a good team. But Alara was exhausted. She couldn't sleep without nightmares. Couldn't be in small rooms without panic. Couldn't let anyone lock a door around her without feeling that old terror claw up her throat. The body healed faster than the mind. 6 months after the trial, Rowan invited her to dinner at his newly rebuilt Blackmore house. The fire damage had been extensive, but he'd restored it beautifully. Light where it used to be dark. Open where it used to be closed. A house that felt like breathing instead of suffocating. They ate in the garden because Alara still preferred open spaces. "You're working yourself to death," Rowan observed. "I'm fine." "You're not. You've lost weight again. You barely sleep. Lyra's worried about you. Lyra should focus on her own work." "She is, but she also sees her sister destroying herself trying to save everyone else." Rowan set down his fork. "You're allowed to rest, you know, allowed to heal. The society will continue without you micromanaging every case." "I can't rest. Not when there are still women locked away. There will always be women locked away. Always be injustice, always be work to do." His voice was gentle but firm. "But if you burn out trying to save everyone, you save no one, including yourself." Alara looked at her plate. At food she could barely taste. At a life she was living at full speed because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. "I don't know how to rest," she admitted. "Every time I slow down, I'm back in that room. Every time I close my eyes, I see those walls. Work is the only thing that makes it quiet." "Then maybe it's time to try something else." "Like what?" "Therapy, proper medical care for trauma, travel to clear your head, anything that isn't running yourself into the ground fighting other people's battles." "They're not other people's battles. They're mine. I was that woman in the locked room. I know what it feels like to be erased." "I know, but you're not her anymore. You're free. And freedom means you get to choose something other than constant warfare." The words hit harder than they should have. Alara sat back, staring at the garden, at flowers blooming in beds that had been ash 6 months ago. "I'm afraid if I stop fighting, I'll disappear again," she said quietly. "Like if I'm not useful, not doing something important, I'll just fade away. Become nothing. That's the trauma talking, not truth." "How do you know?" "Because I've been there. After the war, I threw myself into estate management, social obligations, anything to avoid sitting still and thinking about what I'd seen, what I'd done." Rowan's expression was distant. "It took me 2 years to realize I was just trading one kind of battle for another, and I couldn't heal until I stopped fighting." "Did it help?" "Stopping?" "Eventually, not immediately, not easily, but eventually." He met her eyes. "You deserve that chance." Alara started seeing a doctor who specialized in nervous conditions. Not Whitmore, that quack had fled London after the trial, but a woman named Dr. Helena Marsh, who had radical ideas about treating trauma through talking and rest rather than sedation and isolation. "You're experiencing what I call persistent fear response," Dr. Marsh explained during their first session. "Your body learned to be afraid constantly during those 3 years. Now it doesn't know how to stop, even though the danger is gone. So I'm broken. You're injured. There's a difference. Injuries can heal." The sessions were brutal. Dr. Marsh made her talk about things she wanted to forget. The hunger, the isolation, the moments when she'd thought about giving up. But slowly, incrementally, something shifted. The nightmares didn't stop, but they became less frequent. The panic attacks still happened, but she learned to recognize them before they consumed her. The constant vigilance started to ease just slightly, enough that she could sometimes sleep through the night. Healing wasn't linear. Some days were good. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. Some days the weight of everything crushed her so completely that even breathing felt impossible. But she kept trying, and Lyra was there, always. Bringing tea when words failed, sitting in silence when comfort was impossible, being present without demanding anything in return. "I don't know how you do it," Alara said one particularly bad day. "Watch me fall apart repeatedly and not give up." "You didn't give up on me. When Catherine had all the power and you had none, you still tried to protect me. You think I'd do less for you?" "That was different." "It wasn't. We're sisters. We survived together, or not at all, Mum. A year after the trial, they held the Advocacy Society's first anniversary gala. It was Lyra's idea, a fundraiser to support their work, bringing together wealthy donors, sympathetic politicians, and women who'd been helped by the organization. Elara hated the idea, hated parties, hated crowds, hated being on display. But she agreed because the society needed money, and her presence would help raise it. The event was held at a rented hall in London, decorated with flowers and banners proclaiming their mission. Over 200 people attended, far more than they'd expected. Elara wore a dress that actually fit her now. She'd finally regained most of the weight she'd lost, though her body was different, harder, scarred in ways that didn't show. She stood near the entrance, smiling at guests, accepting compliments and congratulations while internally screaming. Too many people, too much noise, too much attention. But she held it together. Until she saw a young woman hovering near the edge of the crowd. Early 20s, thin, nervous, dressed in clothes that had been nice once but were now worn and faded. Something about her expression, haunted, desperate, trying to be invisible while also trying to be seen, made Elara's chest tighten. She knew that look. She approached carefully. "Hello, I'm Elara Vance." The woman flinched, then seemed to steel herself. "I know. Everyone knows. You're the woman who won. I survived. That's not quite the same thing." Elara kept her voice gentle. "What's your name?" Margaret Fletcher." The words came out rushed. "I'm sorry to bother you at an event like this, but I didn't know how else to reach you, and I thought maybe if I could just talk to you for a moment, take a breath. It's all right. Tell me what happened." Margaret's story spilled out in fragments. A husband who'd declared her incompetent after she'd discovered his affair. Doctors bribed to confirm madness. A locked room in her own house that sounded sickeningly familiar. "I escaped 2 weeks ago," Margaret said, "climbed out a window and ran. But I have nowhere to go. My family believes my husband. Society believes my husband. And if he finds me, he won't." Elara grabbed the girl's hand. "You're safe now. The society has safe houses, solicitors, everything you need to fight back." "But I'm no one. I don't have money or connections, or neither did I. And I won anyway, because the truth matters, and you're going to tell it." Elara squeezed her hand. "I promise you, you're not alone anymore." Margaret started crying. Not sad crying, relief crying, the kind that comes when someone finally believes you after everyone else has called you a liar. Lyra appeared at Elara's elbow with paperwork and calm competence. "Let's get you somewhere quiet where we can take down details. We'll have someone investigate tomorrow." As they guided Margaret away, Elara felt something settle in her chest. This was why she'd fought, why she'd testified, why she'd built the society. Not for glory or revenge or even justice in the abstract, but for moments like this, when one woman could look at another and say, "I believe you, I'll help you, you're not alone." Later that night, after the gala ended and the guests dispersed, Elara stood on the balcony of the rented hall and looked at London spread below her, gas lamps flickering, carriages rolling. People living their lives without knowing about the darkness that existed in locked rooms and false commitments, and women who screamed without sound. Rowan found her there. He'd attended the gala, donated a substantial sum, and spent most of the evening charming wealthy matrons into opening their purses. "Successful night," he said. "We raised enough to fund operations for another year." "I meant for you. You looked not happy, exactly, but purposeful." Elara considered. "I met a woman who reminded me of myself, someone Catherine tried to erase, who refused to stay erased. Did you help her?" "We'll try. Can't promise success, but we'll try." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rowan said, "I have a confession." "Should I be worried?" "Probably. I've been wanting to say something for months, but the timing never seemed right." Elara turned to look at him. He was watching the city, expression unreadable. "When I first saw you in that window," he said slowly, "I told myself I was helping because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed to, because I couldn't walk away from injustice." All true. Yes, but not complete. He met her eyes. I also helped because I saw something in you. Strength, defiance, refusal to break even when breaking would have been easier, and I... He stopped. Started again. I admired it. Admired you. Alara's breath caught. Rowan, I'm not asking for anything. I know you're still healing. Know you might never want what I'm offering, but I couldn't let another year pass without being honest. His voice was steady. I care about you. Not as a rescue, not as a project. As a person I want in my life. However that looks. Silence stretched between them. Alara's mind was racing. She'd been so focused on surviving, on healing, on building the society that she hadn't let herself think about this. About what came next. About whether she wanted something beyond work and purpose. About whether she could trust someone enough to let them close. I don't know if I can do this, she said finally. Romantic relationships, normal life, any of it. I'm still broken in ways I don't know how to fix. You're not broken. You're healing. And healing doesn't have a timeline. What if I never heal completely? Then we figure it out together, or we don't. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. Rowan smiled slightly. I've already committed social suicide by championing your cause. Might as well see it through. Alara laughed. It sounded surprised. That's the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm a soldier, not a poet. Work with what you've got. She looked at him. This man who'd climbed a wall to reach her, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd given her space to heal without demanding anything in return. I can't promise anything, she said. Can't promise I'll ever be the person you think I am. Can't promise I won't have nightmares and panic attacks and days where I'm impossible to be around. I'll take those odds. You're an idiot. Probably. But I'm your idiot if you'll have me. Alara took his hand. It was warm, steady, real. All right, she said. We'll try, slowly, with no expectations and lots of patience and the understanding that I'm going to be difficult. I'd be disappointed with anything less. 2 years after the trial, they held a ceremony at the Advocacy Society's new permanent headquarters. Not a grand building, just a modest townhouse in a respectable part of London with offices downstairs and living quarters above for women who needed temporary refuge. But it was theirs. Funded by donations, staffed by committed people, recognized officially by Parliament after extensive lobbying. They'd helped 83 women in 2 years, secured justice in 52 cases, changed laws in 3 counties, created a model that other organizations were starting to replicate. Small victories in a large war, but victories nonetheless. Alara stood at the dedication ceremony, looking at faces in the crowd, women she'd helped, solicitors who'd fought alongside them, politicians who'd supported their cause. Rowan, standing in the back with that small, proud smile. Lyra was speaking, thanking donors and supporters, outlining their plans for expansion. But Alara's attention was on a woman in the second row. Margaret Fletcher. The girl from the gala 2 years ago. They'd won her case, secured her divorce and her freedom and a portion of her rightful property. Now she worked for the society, helping other women navigate similar situations. Saved becoming savior. Exactly how it should be. When it was Alara's turn to speak, she kept it brief. 3 years ago, I was locked in a room and told I didn't matter, that I was mad, that I would disappear and no one would care. Her voice was steady, strong. But I didn't disappear, I survived. And when I got out, I discovered I wasn't alone. Dozens of women, hundreds of women, trapped in similar situations, erased by families who valued money over humanity. She paused. The Advocacy Society exists because surviving isn't enough. Because one woman's freedom means nothing if others remain imprisoned. Because justice delayed is justice denied, and we've delayed long enough. The crowd applauded. Alara continued, We can't save everyone, can't fix every injustice, can't undo the damage already done, but we can make sure the next generation of women doesn't have to fight as hard as we did. Can create a world where locking someone away requires actual evidence, where a woman's word matters as much as a man's, where being inconvenient doesn't equal being insane. More applause. So thank you for believing in this work, for supporting these women, for refusing to accept that this is just how things are. Alara's eyes found Rowan's, then Lyra's. And thank you to the people who believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself, who saw a prisoner and chose to see a person instead. The ceremony continued with more speeches, more gratitude, more celebration. But Alara stepped outside for air. The street was quiet. Evening settling over London in shades of amber and gray. She stood there breathing, existing, being alive in a way that 3 years ago had seemed impossible. Lyra found her first. "You all right?" "Yeah, just needed a moment." "It's overwhelming, isn't it, seeing what we've built?" "Terrifying, actually. What if we can't sustain it? What if funding dries up or public support fades or—" "We'll figure it out. Like we figured out everything else." Lyra linked arms with her. Together. Rowan appeared next. He didn't say anything, just stood on Alara's other side, a solid presence. They stood together, 3 people who'd been damaged by different wars, finding something like peace in shared purpose. "What happens now?" Lyra asked eventually. Alara thought about the future that stretched ahead, uncertain, complicated, full of work that would never really end, but also full of possibility. "Now we keep going," she said. "We help the next woman, and the one after that, and the one after that, until there are no more locked rooms and erased women. That could take forever. Probably, but we have time." She did have time. For the first time in years, she had time. Time to heal, time to build, time to live instead of just survive. Time to be Alara Vance again, not the ghost Catherine had tried to create, but the person she'd been before imprisonment and the person she was becoming after. Scarred, damaged, imperfect, but free, and standing in the light. Asawawasi. Months later, on her 21st birthday, Alara returned to Thornwood Manor one final time. Not to the house itself, that belonged to someone else now, but to the grounds, to the garden where she'd run from Catherine's men, to the window where Rowan had first seen her. The new owners had renovated extensively. The east wing was gutted and rebuilt. The gardens were manicured differently. Even the ivy that Rowan had climbed was gone, replaced by climbing roses. Nothing remained of her prison, and that felt right. Rowan stood beside her, patient and quiet. They'd been courting slowly, carefully, with setbacks and progress in equal measure. He'd proposed 3 times. She'd refused twice and said maybe once. It was complicated. Everything was complicated, but also good, in a messy, imperfect, thoroughly human way. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I should have died here, that Catherine almost succeeded, that by every reasonable measure I shouldn't be standing here right now." "But you are." "But I am." Alara turned to look at him. "And I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "For the answer to be yes, to your proposal, to a future that isn't defined by what happened in that room." She took his hand. "I can't promise I won't have nightmares. Can't promise I'll ever be completely okay. But I can promise I'll try, and that I want to try with you." Rowan's expression transformed. Surprise and joy, and something that looked like relief. "Yes?" "Yes, if you'll still have me. I'd have you broken or healed or anything in between." He pulled her close. Not too close. He'd learned her boundaries. Just close enough. "I love you, Alara Vance. Have since I saw you in that window refusing to disappear. I love you too, even though you're reckless and stubborn and have terrible timing. Sounds like we're perfect for each other." They stood in the shadow of Thornwood Manor, the place that had almost destroyed her, and Alara felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing, not exactly, but acceptance. She would always carry scars from those 3 years, would always flinch at locked doors and small rooms and certain tones of voice. But she wasn't that prisoner anymore. She was the woman who'd survived, who'd fought back, who'd built something meaningful from the ruins of her trauma. She was Alara Vance, scarred but standing, damaged but determined, broken in places but whole where it mattered, and she was free. Finally, completely, irrevocably free. The girl who'd been erased was gone. The woman who'd refused to stay gone stood in her place, and no one, not Catherine, not society, not even her own fear, would ever erase her again. She turned away from Thornwood Manor and walked toward the carriage, toward Rowan, toward Lyra waiting in London, toward the Advocacy Society, and the work still to be done. toward a future she was finally ready to claim. The hidden prisoner had become a force, and this time the world would remember her name. The end.